You know, it's a strange phenomenon when people are discussing hardcore games in the modern gaming scene. It's not too uncommon for you to hear somebody say that something is the Dark Souls of X genre when discussing games that tend to be particularly hard. This isn't to say that Dark Souls isn't hard, but the concept of a game that is difficult but rewarding, or difficult but in some ways fair, has been around for a long time. At least depending on what your definition of fair might be. Specifically, I'm referencing the Ninja Gaiden games that were out on the NES back in the day. These games were very well designed and very, very challenging. That's not to say that it was an exclusive trait, as many games on the NES were challenging, but it was definitely something that you would say is consistent throughout the trilogy on the NES. Team Ninja decided to continue this with their reboot trilogy. A lot of people have stated that the new Ninja Gaiden trilogy are some of the hardest to play or beat hack and slashes ever, with the exception of the third one. So what better of a team to handle a sort of Dark Souls-esque hack and slash game? Nioh is a Souls-like hardcore RPG hack and slash game in which you play in Japan in the 1600s as real-life historical figure William Adams. For the most part, this game is surprisingly accurate mythology mixed with surprisingly accurate history in regards to the names, time periods, and folklore present in a lot of the game and its creatures. And when I say that these things are accurate, I mean they are surprisingly accurate. In the DLC, which we're going to be talking about, there's a new enemy called the Red Kappa, and in the original mythology, they're stated that they would sneak up behind people and rip out their souls from behind, and this was basically a way of saying that they will literally rip out your anus and run away with it. And lo and behold, but you'd never think you'd see that in a video game. You see, this game is full of a lot of pleasant surprises. The base game, when it came out, was a pleasant surprise for most people in regards to it being a very good competitor to Dark Souls without simply being a complete clone or copy of it due to its very different setting, different gameplay mechanics, different approach to narrative, etc. However, there were two things that were lacking at the time when it came out, which was DLC, because obviously it hadn't come out yet, and PvP, which would not be added until the same day that the DLC came out. We will be covering the DLC in today's video, as the base game has been covered to death already, and we would just like to say, from all of us on this channel, that we very much like Nioh. We consider it a highly well-made game, excellently designed, very challenging without being excessively unfair, but allowing you to have unfair challenges should you wish. And while we're not necessarily going to go out of our way to pick favorites or say which one is or is not superior between this and Dark Souls among the other competitors in the new Souls-like genre, today we're going to be primarily discussing the merits of the DLC and the PvP contained within. The first thing to note is that a lot of the DLC actually does a pretty good job of keeping things consistent in regards to surprising you. The first thing that most people will notice is the new weapon type, which is something of a long sword or a long spear, most likely the equivalent of what others would see as a great sword type weapon, and a plethora of new enemies that greet you along your way towards the first new boss of the DLC. Some of them are neat little nods to mythology, like the grossly accurate red kappas I mentioned before, but others provide a pretty unique challenge. These snake-headed demons are a real hassle to deal with. They have a lot of different attacks that are ranged or grabs from up close that can almost instantaneously kill you, meaning that no matter which playstyle you have, whether it be ranged or close, you are going to have a noticeable amount of trouble with these people at first. Not to mention that it isn't always immediately apparent which people have snakeheads, as some regular soldiers will suddenly turn into them if they lose enough health. And then we have these new brutish type yokai, who you will also most likely have a hard time dealing with them, in that they have a lot of moves which will completely encompass them, and occasionally throw out attacks that will deal non-stop combos, such as this one. Saying these things are relentless are like saying the prequel movies aren't the favorite among the Star Wars fandom. Once you make your way through the first level, you finally get to meet the first boss of the game. Now, I'm not gonna say that I died a lot to this boss. I'm gonna show you. You the one I'm talking about, Jalen? Yep, the one where I died a lot. That's the one. Now, one thing that should be made clear by this point is the game has a very relentless approach to it, as mentioned before with the previous enemy. Most bosses, depending on who you face, will not let up if they get an attack out on you. It should be noted that I was severely underleveled when playing this, mostly due to me wanting to beat it quickly, related to time constraints. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a really dumb move and a really fun time once I actually did manage to beat it. The next level was a bit more interesting in that you have to navigate a relatively labyrinthine castle, and you actually get two bosses in this one. The first one, which we could consider a miniature dual boss, is pretty entertaining. He has a monologue in your direction, and you actually get an achievement if you hear him out before attacking. And he will very hilariously get pissed off at you if you interrupt his speech. Now, while he isn't the hardest boss, he is at the very least an entertaining one, and does take a fair amount of knowledge of items and other skills in order to take him down. Not necessarily a brute force, excessively good timing kind of boss, just one that requires you to be aware of the tools and ninja or ninpo sets in the game. Then finally we get to the actual boss, the big bad of this DLC, at least at first. His fight is pretty entertaining, and also one that I died to a lot. He has a lot of high-ranging moves that tend to do 90%, if not 100% of your health in one hit, as well as a few different kinds of guardian spirits. This will range from ones that make him slightly harder to deal with, and by that I mean doubling the range of his one-hit kill attack, or we have ones that make him even more slightly harder to deal with, in which he fills a lot of spaces on the ground with water that both give you a status ailment and prevent you from recovering stamina, which is the crux of the entire combat system in the game, so good luck recovering from that one. But eventually, you can prevail over this boss. However, it's revealed that a character who was present in previous cutscenes, Maria, had snuck off during all the commotion, and that she is actually the one who has been behind the events of this DLC the whole time, secretly supplying the different leaders in Japan with Amrita, for goals which have not yet been revealed and most likely will be delved into in future DLC. So you go to the storehouse where she has all the Amrita stored, and try to fight her.
Looks like Spain is following in England's footsteps.
Nos habéis arrebatado nuestra edad de oro. Don't pretend we're the same.
And this is where I know I'm going to get a little bit of flack in the comments, but I couldn't beat Maria by myself. tried so hard. It's crazy the kind of combos that she can pull off. Not only does she have really good recovery after any combo that you land on her, but during the second phase of the fight, it is impossible to stun lock her, and she can teleport on any side of the room. Damage output is something that I don't factor into just because, as previously mentioned, I was so underleveled that any given boss could most likely kill me in a few hits anyway. So I don't know if she's necessarily overpowered, but her skill set does make her rather difficult to avoid, especially if you're someone who prefers close combat. Even with my particular skill set, in which I tended to prefer the Kusarigama or the Spear, which tend to be mid to long range for the most part, I still got caught up in a lot of grabs which would, for the most part, kill me in 1 or 2 hits. But, thanks to the help of someone else, and also the death of my shape, able to defeat Maria and reveal the next portion of the plot, in which she flees in order to get help from other rival leaders in Japan, and hopefully to fuel more wars. Afterwards, a variety of other side missions come up in which you go to similar or the same areas that you have been to, but with new combat placement, such as this one where you have to go backwards through a camp that you had previously gone through, and face several slightly more powerful bosses that were seen in the base game. Now, the plot isn't something that's inherently to write home about for people who are new to the game, but for those of you who actually have beaten the base game, you'll find a lot of these events to be, at the most part, relevant and have a decent amount of emotional impact, especially in regards to Hattori Hanzo. If I were to compare this DLC to, say, the DLC offerings that we typically see in the Dark Souls series, I would, at least for now, put this as on par with them, in that we got several new bosses, which I find to be both challenging and memorable. We get some new weapons, and we also get different abilities in the form of guardian spirits, and the new weapon arts that are included with the new weapon set. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. The longevity of these games, based on people who tend to be some of the biggest fans of them, usually comes down to PvP. When you beat any of the games in the series, unless you want to completely go through the game in another class, or speed run it, or do some other thing where you play the whole game as deprived and without wearing any armor, most people are only going to play it about once, at least in regards to the PvE, the bosses, the enemies. And yet, most people will come back for the PvP. So now, we go to a live interview with Jalen to tell us about his thoughts on the PvP, as well as his opinions on the comparisons we have for the PvP in comparison to the original competitor, Dark Souls.
So remember in the main game of Nioh, when you fought like a ghost, and for those who haven't played, it's basically the game kind of stores your AI data, and when another player is playing online and they access it, similar to like the Bloodstains, but instead of seeing how you die like in the Soul series, you resurrect their ghost and you can fight their ghost and you can get items from there, and the AI of that ghost will pick up on the tendencies of the player. And if you say use like a spear, it'll use that. If you did a lot of magic, it'll do that. If you did ninja skills, it will do that. Or if you shot people with guns a lot, it will do that. And typically, the better the player is, the better the ghost is. But since it's an AI, it can be manipulated. Now, DLC add-on PvP talk here. Boy, oh boy, that is chaos. We're talking fully decked out Williams that can, know how to use their skills and can dodge and dip, dive, duck, dive, and dodge all over the place. And you got no time to really adjust if it's your first time. In my experience, that's what happened to me. And it can be overwhelming, those like first few matches, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're up against. And it's nothing like fighting a ghost. But I feel like that's self-explanatory. When you're fighting, there's two modes. There's 2v2 mode and 1v1. And in 1v1, that's a bit more manageable because it's just you and another person. And so I'll start there. In 1v1, you only carry your two weapons and a few items in both your shortcut slots. Now, all the items you carry will be severely reduced. So let's say you have 7 kunai in the main game, just doing PvE, going through the levels. They cut that down to 3, and it's similar to the other items. And you can only have 1 elixir. So immediately that like changes everything, like how you approach the fight, because you only have 1 healing item, so you only get to make so many mistakes. And I feel that depending on the build you have, you might not be equipped to fight an enemy, because while the levels are balanced out in the PvP arena, there's still the weight requirements of like heavy armor still gives you a bit more stability than weaker armor, with of course the fact that lighter armor gives you better movement options, and that's something to take into account as well. And if you're not taking into account that kind of stuff, you can be hitting somebody like, oh no, they didn't stagger, and then you can get just hit to death. And now on to 2v2. 2v2 is, a typical team type thing, 2 players against another 2 players. And if you're familiar with kind of like those arena style fighters, like the Gundam Versus series, where you're fighting 2-on-2 as well, and there's like a gauge, and you can die so many times, and every time you die, it takes a chunk out of that gauge. And then once the gauge is empty, the game's over, and then the team with the gauge still filled wins. So it's like that. You have the option to revive your partner, but typically that's probably not going to happen, because the team will probably, the opposing team will attack you and keep you away from that grave, so you can't revive your partner. That's where the chaos really comes from, 2v2, because you can be fighting some guy one-on-one, and from behind you can get like a hit by like maybe a kunai or a bomb, or just attacked by an axe or whatever, because you weren't really paying attention to what was going on with your teammate and their opponent. So coordination is key there, and that's kind of like the base of like the PvP.
I see. Excellent. First question I have for you is overall enjoyment of the PvP since you've started playing it.
I have fun with it. I don't win a lot with it, of course, but when I do play it, because I'm not that much of a PvP kind of guy, I'm more about the single player aspect. But when I do play, I do have fun. I think it's cool to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing these cool techniques or stuff. And I do wish that we had a little bit more like items to work with, because like they take about 60% of the count away.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, if I had more kunai, I could do this, or if I had more like blinding shells, that would work too. Because like you only get one blinding shell, because you only get two in the main game. And if they just gave us more resources and maybe like just reduce the time that they're active in PvP, I think that would be better than just like giving us only so many.
Yeah, you're right, because there's I think, at least as far as I can tell, their intention was they didn't want someone who can just, like, spam item after item over and over again, you know? Because that's always... I don't think that would inherently be a problem, because, like, if that's your build, like, if you're someone who is built primarily to be, like, a ninja or a mage, that kind of cuts that class... Like, it doesn't cut them out of PvP, but it basically takes the things that make that a viable class, and they kind of...
It severely limits them.
Well, I mean, it's like they've nerfed that entire class. Same with, like, the mages, where if you want to use a bunch of... Sorry,
no. Like, at least in PvP, yeah. Like, they're not as effective because they don't have as much access. I feel like Amio is a bit better suited to PvP because they can still at least use some of that to buff themselves, and that'll give them a good head start.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I actually have, like, a decent mix between some of my weapons and my magic, and they also reduce the count of magic you have. So, like, the number of spells you have is cut at least in half, because most of the spells I have are anywhere from, like, 1 to 6, and some of them are cut down to 1 or 2, like, like, even ones where I have, like, a lot, I double stacked the Guardian Spirit tokens one, so in, PvE, I have 6 of those. And in PvP, I have 2.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so, like, it cuts down on that, and, like, every other thing is cut down to, like, 1. So you're right, it is slightly more useful for the mage, but, repeated use of any of those things is, for all intents and purposes, gone. And it's not to say that they shouldn't reduce something because of balance, but I feel like it's more trying to make people focus towards melee classes instead of some of the more utility-based classes, which is fine, but I wish it wasn't limiting to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And like I completely agree about that. I don't think that. Well, it's like I said before, they should reduce the amount of time those things are active.
Oh yeah.
Instead of limiting how many you can have. Like I can understand maybe like 2 or 3, like at least 5 or 6 of like your items, at least 5.
Yeah, because like another thing they could do is just like in the example of like the Guardian Spirit ones, it's like I would say that they could potentially reduce its effectiveness in that particular case instead of cutting down on the number of them, because I like to, for example, combo with that. Like I use Enko, that's the fire lion thing. Or fire tiger, so like I do that, it launches up, it does knock up, and I hit them when they're on the ground. It's like that's a combo I use, and I can't really do that particular one. It's not to say that every combo needs to be like sacred for like the gameplay, but it takes some of the subs that people might be used to and limits them merely to like what can you do melee only stuff, and it's not to say I don't only do that, because, same with, like, health pools, too. Most of the time, when I use it on enemies, it's because I need to try and do a ground stab finisher move just to whittle away at the boss's health, but, it's pretty good in regards to, like, balancing, health and damage so far, at least as far as I can tell. As far as I'm concerned, just to kind of get back to the original question, though, I was pretty content with the PvP, mainly because I didn't feel like a victory was ever cheap, I would say. Whenever I was playing, it was very challenging, and similar to you, I barely won. I won once or twice, but I didn't really win that often, and so I'd like to see what it's like in the future. But for now, it's pretty hard, because I started off, like everyone else, at a C. I'm at a C- right now. Not because I win enough to keep my rank, but because I like played 5 or 6 games, lost 4 of them, and then when I won the 5th one, I'm like, yep, that's all I need for now. until I can level up or get my build better. But okay, I don't know if you noticed this, but I did in mine. Everyone likes wearing the red demon armor, don't they?
It's very frequent, yeah. Like as soon as like I beat the game, and like I beat my first ghost after that, like he dropped the full set of red demon armor. I was like, oh,
Yep. There's so many ghosts when I like would go around doing it for like clan battles, and I just like go to places with like a lot of ghosts. You see at least one piece of red demon armor on like so many people. It's insane.
I'm using it right now, but not because I really like it. I mean, it's not a bad set of armor. It's just it's a bit heavier, so I get more defense out of it.
Nah, see, I primarily use it because I'm trying to focus a little bit more on spear stuff. You know, it's like because I originally, when I was doing it, like as far as like building my class and doing other stuff, I was trying to figure out like, oh hey, what kind of stuff can I do? Because when I first played the game, I was very armor centric, and I started going on forums, and I eventually found out, oh hey, maybe wearing heavy armor and using the Kusarigama is not a good setup. And,
Oh no, not at all.
yeah, and so then I figured out, oh, that's why I'm like dying constantly. So then I switched to like a light armor set so I could get my weight class to A, you know, so I could actually have like really fast stamina recovery. And I'm like, oh my god, what happened? This is a whole new game. What would you say in regards to discussing balance, you know, between weapons and health and levels and items? Because I know we discussed a little bit about item usage, but how would you say the balance is currently in PvP?
I don't think it's balanced at all, and this is me not going like really deep into it. This is just off of like a gut thing, and that's not saying they didn't attempt to balance it, because they did. They in the patch that came with the update with all the DLC and stuff, like they readjusted some of how the weapons work. Like the Kusarigama definitely takes a lot more stamina when you use it to attack now, and I think the spear might do a little less damage overall, and I think they might have like adjusted some of the hitboxes, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Like the disparity among weapons is still there. Like I feel like the spear is definitely the best like all around weapon to use, because like it has a lot of really good attacks. And like the sword is still like, you know, like the most basic weapon you can use. And then like the dual swords, they can be useful, but like I found that when I was trying to use the weapons, like I like to use dual swords, and I like to use the main katana. I like the Odachi too, and I definitely have to work with the Odachi. But I felt like the dual swords, they definitely do less damage now, and so like I like to use them in low stance a lot, and it just wasn't cutting it for me. So I ended up going to like katana, low stance, and mainly using heavy attack to go in and out kind of, until like I had like a definite like, all right, I can attack this person with like a cool combo. I don't think anyone I fought in PvP used an axe.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah, I haven't seen really anybody do that, which is weird because I've seen a few people like ghosts, for example, who made really good use of axes. That kind of tripped me up. But then again, I'm a lightweight Kusarigama class going up against, you know, most likely a very tanky kind of axe build, so it's probably no wonder that, you know, they could get one over on me if I wasn't careful. But it's just crazy, especially with like, I don't know if it carries over into like the ghost, but I saw some of the mystic arts for axes were just insane, you know? Because like there's one, for example, that I remember was like really, really cool. It was the one where like if you're in the yokai realm, you get like an attack boost.
Oh yeah, geez, that one's crazy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm sorry, just it's slightly off topic, but I just recall seeing that. And mind you, I have no experience with the axe. I haven't built up any of like my skills for it or anything. But I decided to read that because, you know, why not? And I just thought it'd be hilarious. Well, just the concept is hilarious, you know, like, you know, yokai just summons that realm, guy with an axe walks up. I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me.
And yeah, that sounds useful for PvE, but like the people might have find it too slow for PvP, and we might actually see a change in the future where like the axe might be sped up, or they might increase the damage on the axe in PvP to make it worth playing.
Yeah, and see, I hope they do something to balance that a bit, because I see a lot of, just for comparison with Dark Souls, I see people use heavy weapons, you know, on average, like, about as often as any other weapon class. You
Yeah.
know, like, you see a pretty good variety of people doing that when they do invasions and PvP in Dark Souls just across the series. At least from what I've seen, because it's not like, you know, only one weapon type. Like, I haven't seen, like, people in Dark Souls, like, only use straight swords or only use great swords. You know, I see a variety of things that are, you know, pretty heavy, because you're right, the axe is definitely the slowest of the weapon types, and considering how insanely fast PvP is, it's no wonder that it's kind of gone by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
The final thing I guess we're going to get to is just comparing it to Dark Souls itself in regards to what we've played of both and how we feel about them in comparison. Like, which one's better, which one's worse, why, you know, and that's if they're even comparable. So I'll let you take the lead on this one.
All right. So, first of all, there are no invasions in Nioh. I think that's a big factor to play in. So you actually have to go out of your way to do PvP. It's not like, you know, you don't want to do PvP, but you're still playing online for some reason, and oh no, someone invaded me, so now I have to fight them. I'm engaging in PvP almost against my own will. And I feel like the builds in Dark Souls, despite you can make a PvE build in Dark Souls and probably it would still be fine PvP. While I feel like in Nioh, if you really want to like dominate PvP, you would have to make an entirely different build.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And like that's not a problem because, you know, the Book of Reincarnation, I feel like most people at this point in the game, if they've been playing since the start in February, have at least 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But not everyone wants to respec themselves.
Yeah, not to mention that if we have this sort of thing where we want to swap back and forth between PvE and PvP, it would be kind of harder to do that considering we have future DLCs coming out. So it'd be like if someone beat, you know, DLC 1, you know, this one that we have, and then they go to PvP in the meantime. Then the new one comes out and they're like, oh man, I'm not built for PvE, I gotta use another book. And then they're done and they like swap back and forth. And this is only going to be an issue right now while the DLCs are still coming out.
Yeah.
But you're right, and like on that note, I wish there was a function at least for you to, and this is across the board. I wish you could do something like in your inventory menu in which you could switch between, like, say, different presets of armor and equipment.
Oh yeah.
You know, like imagine if you had, like, say, you know, inventory 1, inventory 2, inventory 3, and so then you go in there and you switch, and let's say, like, you know, first one is like for the axe, and it's like, oh, heavy armor axe, and then you can switch to, like, the second one, it's light armor spear, you know, so you could, like, just quickly switch between those things, you know?
I wouldn't mind it if we could save like armor sets that we really like.
Yeah, like just a preset of, like, oh, I want this armor and these items and these weapons. And so that like a I don't know what you call it, but like a preset custom thing. Well, not preset in that I don't know what the word is for it, but we'll call it a template. You know?
Yeah. That's a good name for it.
Yeah, you have it, and then you just click save, and then if you're like, maybe you change it up later, like, oh, I want to go back to this one after maybe trying out something new, and then you go back to it and be like, hey, ta-da, I'm back. I think that would be very useful, especially for the sake of PvP, because if you have different, like, tool sets or equipment for that, then I think that would be great. Especially because, like, if you want to jump from one to the other, like, oh, I just beat a boss, I'm ready for PvP. Click, I'm in a different outfit now. But that wouldn't help necessarily with stats, but maybe that's something they could do potentially in the future, because I know that's a little bit different, but maybe they could have a feature, and I don't think this has been implemented before, but who knows? What if they had
At least
a
not in a
feature...
Souls game.
Yeah, no, I mean a different feature, like as in, let's say you could swap between your, say, character builds between saves, without having to actually leave that save.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Like, as in, let's say as a caveat, let's say you have to beat the main story campaign before you can do this, you know, just to make sure you're not, like, you know, I guess cheating, like, oh, I'm gonna do this person and swap it over here. But it'd be like, oh, I have this person who has, like, all their stats, like, pumped up into vitality and strength, and then swap it over. Okay, now I have it in, you know, magic and spirit bond. Like, if you could just do that without having to use an item to, like, respec it. But mind you, that might break it necessarily, because then you're right, it would potentially negate the need to use the Book of Reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think it'll just be a useful tool, so you don't have to create 2 different saves. You know, one for PvP and one for PvE. But then again, people have been doing that for Dark Souls for a while now, so maybe it's just me being too impatient. You know, like, oh man, I don't want to have to just change to a different save file. That'll take like 10 seconds.
Well, it's not only that, but like you have to beat a level and then go back to the map.
Yeah.
And then go to the Torii Gate to activate PvP. It's not like, okay, I want to fight somebody right now, and then there's an option right at a shrine whenever you have it, you know?
Yeah, of course. So, but, yeah, so I'll say this, though, to kind of steer the conversation back to where we were going. How would you rate the enjoyment of the PvP, or the quality of the PvP in comparison to Dark Souls? Because I know it's very different, you know, one being invasions and one being like a thing that you have to choose to go out of your way, but just for the sake of, let's say, the battles themselves, how would you rate your enjoyment of them?
Just on the battles themselves, I like that it's chaotic. Like, I say that it's chaotic, but that's not like an inherently bad thing. Dark Souls PvP can get to that point, but it's definitely a lot more slow and methodical. And there's a big focus on defending, trying to get around the defense, where like in Nioh it's definitely more about offense and dodging to get out of the way, so you put yourself in a position that you can continue your own offense, you know?
Yeah.
I've always been more attracted to that anyway, but like I still enjoy Dark Souls PvP when I play it.
Oh yeah. I think it kind of feels reminiscent to Bloodborne in a way. You know, in the sense that in that game you also didn't have a ton of like shield
defense
options. You know, I mean they they have the wooden shield, and they did add another one with the DLC, but aside from those 2 options, you basically just have to be evasive and, you know, quick and aggressive. And yeah, and you obviously can block in Nioh too, but for the most part, that's more of a stamina game than it is anything else, because it's just crazy, especially because, you know, when I was playing PvP, I would try and block with some of my stuff, but it would just shred all my stamina, and then I'd be sitting there, and they'd, you know, kill me in one hit because of the, you know, stamina drain, or special attack, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. You don't have to worry about stamina as much in Dark Souls PvP like you do in Nioh's PvP.
Oh yeah.
Because there's that stipulation of where you won't be able to move for a point, and then you'll get hit for big damage. I know that's kind of like an aside, but that's definitely something we should have mentioned.
If you had to say which one is either more enjoyable, better designed, or superior to with these 2 facing each other, would you be able to definitively say one is better than the other? And if you could, which one would you say it is?
I feel, as of right now, because Nioh's PvP will evolve in the next few updates with the DLCs, I'm sure. Dark Souls PvP is just a little bit of an edge over it because it's a little more manageable. What I mean by that is there are less factors you have to take into account of. It's more on the fly.
With those things in mind, would you say one is better than the other, or better designed, or I would just say among these 2, do you have a favorite or a preference?
I feel Dark Souls is better designed, but that's really more about that. It's had 3 different games to work it around, you know? I like Nioh's. It still needs improvement.
Yeah, I think.
But I feel like if they do the right kinds of improvements, I will really enjoy it.
Alright, well in that case, do you have anything else you want to say for the video or for the audience, I guess, before we wrap this up then?
I know it seems impossible right now, but get enough glory so you can buy Okatsu, and then when you're in PvP, just emote and just yell at people with the gesture. With one of the gestures that, like, where you shout and you go like, oh!
Oh god, I've seen a few people do that, and it's just hilarious to see the characters yelling.
Yeah, definitely do that. That's fun.
Alright. Well, thank you very much for your input, Jalen.
No, it's no trouble, man. It was a pleasure.
Overall, if you were to ask us what our opinions are with this particular package, we would definitely say that this is a worthwhile DLC and definitely challenging and worth the price, especially with the consistent content updates that are available for free, regardless of whether or not you have the season pass, such as something consistently seen in PvP, where people can actually transform themselves into other characters. In the latest patch, which adds this content for free, you can now change into a majority of the female characters in the game, whereas previously you could only turn into the male ones. This DLC's rating is going to get a very solid 9 out of 10 from me. It's not that this DLC did anything inherently wrong, but it didn't necessarily blow me away by the likes of the Ringed City or Artorias of the Abyss. This is more akin to some of the Dark Souls 2 DLCs or the first DLC for Dark Souls 3, in that it was very good, definitely serviceable, and nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just not something that wowed me, nothing that dazzled me, so to speak. But regardless, getting Nioh with the Season Pass DLC is a fine purchase if you ever find it on sale or if you can find a package deal. I could not recommend it more. Thank you for watching. If you'd like our content, feel free to subscribe, or if you'd like to see other content made by me, you can check out my own channel, Cricket Lenny, or my more political channel, Cerebral Caesarean. Links are in the description if you wish to contact our social media, and comment section below if you would like to tell us how we do on our videos or tell us your opinions on this game. Any and all feedback is highly appreciated. Stay tuned for more content from this channel. The second DLC video will be out most likely a few weeks after its release. And as for the next video, get ready boys, we're taking a trip to Dubai.